Welcome to Pacific Unitarian Universalist Church. How great are those musicians, right? Wow. We're functioning online as the world is at this moment in time, and we'll be back together physically, hopefully sooner rather than later, but we're following all the CDC guidelines and keeping with that. But we miss the choir, I miss seeing people in front of us. It's a weird time, as we all know. But it's pushed us forward in many ways. We've just found some budget money for upgrade this process, so our president isn't standing there with his iPhone filming me. We've cultivated pods for people who are members of the church or close friends. We've got different groups of people who are staying in touch that way. This coming Saturday morning, we have a Building Your Own Theology class, which is filmed, and people can respond in there. I'm going to try to make it more interactive this week. And also on Saturday, for those who want to come and safely social distance, bring your mask. We're doing a little trail cleanup from 10 to 2. Andy Kistner is leading that, but if you show up with muscles and willingness to move, we'll have you digging weeds in our garden there. There's a call this afternoon, as there is on every Sunday at 3 o'clock. I call it Vivian's Call, but it's really a social call. But there's also a theme, and the theme is sort of different layers of gratitude. Again, this is a topic, sort of what are you grateful for in these times and beyond. So, a lot still going on here at Pacific Unitarian Church, and this is a sermon I sort of look forward to every year. It's always a little bit anxiety-provoking, but it's a chance for people usually writing on note cards to write in questions, and I sort of just respond to questions. Sometimes there's a panel. We figure out some way to make it interactive, and today is that day. So if you're at home and you just wonder what the nature of the church is, or stuff about the history, or really any question that you think is vaguely polite and relevant, you can tap that into the computer, and we'll try to get to those questions and just sort of do a little bit of an interactive field day piece with that. But here we are. I've already lit the chalice, not to be clumsy and not to be too close, and I'm going to invite up one of our choir members, Andrea Matson-Decay, to read our chalice words for us.
Good morning. Our reading this morning is by Stephen M. Schick. From the loneliness of troubled times we come, to discover that we are not alone. Into the dwelling place of togetherness we come, to collect remnants of hope. From fear that all is lost we come, to discover what will save us. Into the comfort of each other's arms we come, to feel the strength that has not yet vanished. From darkness we come, to wait until our eyes begin to see. Into the refuge of fading dreams we come, to remove illusions and focus new visions. From despair that walks alone we come, to travel together. Into the dwelling place of generations we come, to pledge allegiance to being peace and doing justice.
Hello. This is the moment where I get to talk to the children, the younger people in our families. And I hope some of you are watching because I miss you guys. It's been a long time. And you know what I know? Next time I see you, you're going to be a little bit different. You're going to be a little bit smarter. You're going to be a little bit bigger. You will have had some really interesting things to add to your stories. Did you know you had a story? You do have a story. I like stories. You can get stories from books, movies, plays. Somebody can tell you a story. What's your favorite way of getting a story? Sometimes I like them best when I can read them or just hear them because I like it when my imagination can fill in all the colors and the characters and the actions instead of just watching a movie all the time. And I'm kind of wondering, like, what's your favorite kind of story? Do you like scary mysteries or stories about animals? Do you like them better when they're anime or animated? Do you really like fairy tales? Do you ever like true stories? Stories that tell you about people and things that really happened? Sometimes I like real stories the best, you know, the story about a person or someone like you. I want to know things like, how does it feel to be home all the time? What are you planning to do today? What's your favorite color and why? If you could ride your bike, draw a picture, or make pancakes, which one would you rather do? I know right now you're not going to school, and I wonder, do you miss school? What do you miss most, if you do? Recess? Friends? Your teacher? Do you kind of like being home? Do you spend a lot more time hanging out with your parents, your pets? And what's your favorite place in your house? And why do you like it there? I like hanging out in my kitchen a lot. First of all, it always smells really good. And second of all, I'm not there for very long before somebody's bound to wander through, so I'm never alone. You really do make a good story, you know? And the story of who you are, what you do, what you like, and how you feel, all different kinds of parts of it. Those are the best parts of it. And you know what? No one else's story will be anything like yours. Yours is a unique story. Maybe you can think about your story and draw it out, or record it, or write it, or maybe you just want to tell it to somebody. Maybe you just want to tell it to me. Call me.
This morning's prayer is Choices by Marcia Stennard. Yesterday there were fewer cars at the arrivals dock at the Portland airport than there were dogs being walked on my block. Yesterday a friend reported a clandestine meeting, a walk with her elderly mother, careful to keep a 6-foot distance as they strolled together in the sunshine. Yesterday schools were closed, and bars, and restaurants. We no longer gather, laughing in bustling crowds of strangers who might become friends. But today, people in Italy sang together on their balconies. Meals on Wheels drivers put bags of food on doorknobs, backed up 6 feet, and waited to see if their seniors were okay. Today, the technology we swore was killing our relationships, those phones our youth sink into, ignoring the world in front of them, it's saving us, letting us gather, see one another's faces. Tomorrow, fewer people will sicken and die if we keep our distance today. Imagine if all difficult choices had such clear and obvious results. And then imagine living as if they do. Amen.
build a spontaneous questions into the sort of liturgy that we do about every 2 years. It gives people, gives me a break from preparation. And it gives people a chance to sort of get off their chest what they don't get a chance to, since it's so didactic in most of what we do, which is always a bit disturbing to me. I always kind of want it to be more interactive. So today is ultimately interactive. Some people have pre-prepped some questions, but others are responding as we speak. So this is your chance to sort of, you've got any kind of remotely church-oriented question that you want to ask, or something about my history, or something about Unitarians, or whatever. Tap it in, and we'll see if we get to it in the next 20 minutes, and hopefully this will be more insightful than indulging. So, do we have any questions?
What stigma do you think UUs need to get over?
What stigma? Well, we do have kind of a holier-than-thou quality about our doubt, I guess you'd say. I don't know if that's a stigma. But, I mean, there is a cultural barrier in this country, of course, between, right, it's red and blue, but I think it's beyond red and blue. It's sort of intellectual and earthy, and I think that there's judgment passed in both ways, which, I mean, I think some of that's, inevitably necessary because it's a difference of opinion, and there's different policy guidelines for that nationwide. Stigmas for us, I think people are afraid to have doubts and yearning, right? We UUs tend to be a fairly composed bunch, and when we're anxious and when we're yearning for more faith than we often walk in the room with, I think we're quiet about that because we tend to be more intellectual than earnest and angstful about what it is to be alive. And it's just a scary, wonderful thing to be alive, and I think sometimes we neuter that by trying to be too smart. I don't know if that's exactly the right answer, but that is certainly a cultural problem and a theological problem for us. It's part of why we have a problem with evil. We'd rather not see it, right? So we don't deal with the darker side very well, and I think we don't deal with the anxious side very well too. It's scary to be a human being in many forms, as we all know right now.
Reverend Steve, you talk about Jesus being your hero, but not your savior. How does that work?
Adequately. That's insightful. I mean, Jesus is my hero. I grew up a Christian, and I'm a guy, so I think that for males, it's natural to have that male role model. I don't believe Jesus is the Son of God. I believe that's a lot of mythic storytelling, but we've neutered so much, and I've neutered so much in my own life of what's mythic, that I really have kind of almost built a little bubble around Jesus, and stepping away from acknowledging him as my savior, I've sort of preserved him in a little bit of a glass bottle, so to speak, where in my mind, he's kind of the perfect balance of compassion meets courage. He's irreverent sometimes, knocking over tables in the temple. He's beloved by little kids. He's willing to go to his death. I just think he's there's great characters all over the world, right? From Star Wars to Homer's epic to all of these great things. He just happens to be my favorite. So. And I think also I want to hold on to him because so many people come to Unitarian Universalism, which has Christian roots from their own Christian roots, that I like to lift up Jesus because it honors where we all came from, even if that's not exclusively where we are now. So I think it's also important that I do that as a pastor. That's my basic answer to that.
Here's a new question. What do you say to people who believe that UUs can believe whatever they want, and therefore it is not a real religion?
Well, I would say that in most churches, just to start, most people a lot of people in traditional churches of any flavor, mosques, temples, they can often believe whatever they want as long as they're not too vocal about it, right? So that's true here as well. I mean, there are a lot of people who would challenge even some of the 7 principles or the basic philosophies or the tones of Unitarian Universalism. As long as they do so politely, they're not going to be too critiqued. But we do have core values, but one of our core values is that our core values are not fixed in time, which is very confusing, right? So we do have values. You would never find a UU not saying that compassion and kindness and love in its sort of general form is something to lift up. So we have values, but we don't lock them down quite so much. So it does make us look and feel a little vaguer. When you have a creed, you can sort of kind of evaluate in or out much easier. But we certainly have an ethos. How's that? We have a variety of beliefs. People come in with different levels of religious longing and different paths, but we have a shared ethos that tolerance is the way forward, tolerance mixed with justice, with some reverence for the past, but some unfolding sense of how truth gets emerged in the future. And that's such a modern perspective that I get why people don't think it's a real religion, because most of what is religious is locked into past ideas, right? That's traditionally what we think of as a religious philosophy. So we flip the script on that. But UUs are generally fairly consistent in who they are and in what they believe, and even if we're not creedal about it. There's a continuity in the culture of Unitarian Universalism. I've served churches in Australia, Chicago, preached in 13 states, been in 4 countries, and I'll tell you that ethos is sort of like pretty shared. You can often not know where you are if you're in a UU church. So there you go.
What would you have done if you hadn't become a minister?
I almost didn't go to college, so I might have gone into my father's contracting business, but I was really not very good at that, so I don't know how long that would have lasted. I would like to be an interior decorator. I mean, that's something I kind of would love to do. I think I could have been a teacher. I'll probably find some way to teach in a formal academic way. I think like a teacher. I think probably even more than as a pastor. I don't know, a park ranger in the national parks would be kind of cool, kind of working at Yosemite or like having some chance to roam around these gorgeous places and be sort of useful would be great. If I had any talent to sing, I might have tried to become a musician, but I started to learn guitar and realized that I can't sing, and then that kind of killed that dream. So, I don't know, those things would be good, I'm more of a ham than I ever thought I was, so performing is something that has, in any kind of form, like I might have probably done theater in high school in a way that I never did, so those kind of things. But I'm pretty happy I made the choice for ministry. I think it's a good fit, and it's been I think it's the best decision I've ever made, because I could have gone another way. I was going to be an activist, and I just hated the grinding level of work that involved. So I took the easy route, and here I am.
So one of our listeners asks, I often run into people who have never even heard of Unitarian Universalism. I even carry a little 7 Principles card with me, just in case.
Yeah.
Are there other recommendations of how we can explain our religion?
Yeah. I have and I do this, so it's in my head easily. I can, roll off different explanations. Here's what I say a lot. I say it's sort of 1/3 liberal arts education. A church service is 1/3 sort of liberal arts education on a topic. It's 1/3 church, and it's 1/3, community civic social group with some cause. So that's kind of a mix. But I would encourage everybody to come up with their own answer, right? Come up with an elevator speech that just rolls off your tongue, right? Where, some of the themes are that we're sort of spiritual without being locked to old ideas. Like I would say that. I would say most Unitarian Universalists are liberal. I say that if Elizabeth Warren went to church, she'd probably go to a Unitarian Universalist church. That tends to help people answer that question a little bit, but well, not exclusively. There's a whole libertarian streak within Unitarian Universalism too. You could answer that question for yourself. I'd say I'd say the values we hold are principles rather than rules. And that's an important distinction, right? We don't follow particular rules or say certain things are true. We would take principles and values and try to apply them to the situation because the earth is always moving. So that's a difference between us and others. We tend to not lock down what we think is true, which of course makes us confusing and leads to great questions like that. But it makes us mobile and a little bit more nimble. So it's a great question. And we wring our hands for how we spread the message more than we are, because we think most people, or lots of people, are Unitarian Universalists and just don't know it. That is the great greedy thought for UUs these days.
Times are intense. Injustice is prevalent. How do you bring joy and levity into this situation? Bring back the smiles.
There's always injustice rampant, right? Always. You can't find a time where there was a golden age of humanity where there wasn't deprivation and inequality and, sexism, and there's always that going on. And there obviously is that with a pandemic. It's a little darker than it normally is. But, long before 2 months ago, we had our own tons of levels of social issues, right? Battles about how the nation's going to move forward and all of that. I don't know. There's so much joy in everyday life. I think you just need to stop and appreciate it, right? I mean, there's the beauty of nature. There's just, the wisdom, there's the humor. We've all got these, gifs and memes and little statements about being trapped, and there's just a great amount of levity to that. The great comic line is that tragedy plus time equals comedy. And I think it's important to just enjoy that there's an absurdity to life. And, when your kids are at home and they're trying to do their homework and you're trying to Zoom and the bandwidth is gone, you throw your hands up in the air and you just you laugh. If we have the eyes to see it, there's, plenty of joy and goodness. There's never a moment where that just goes away unless you're, I'm not going to suggest somebody in a concentration camp is experiencing much of that. But in general, there's equal reason to suffer and an equal amount to be joyful. And that's happening around the world all the time. That's what I got.
One of our listeners made note that you said that you believe we all come from Jesus. We have some members who do not share that belief. How do you qualify that comment?
Not we all don't come from. The church comes out of the Protestant tradition, so that's really what I meant by that. Obviously, people walk in from secular faiths. They were, practicing Muslims. I mean, there's a whole cadre of different people. So I didn't mean to speak that everyone comes from that place, but the church root the tree of the church is Protestant. I mean, we broke from Unitarians, broke from what are Congregationalists. We were basically the two churches that were in this country at the very start, and they split because we needed more churches and there was a theological division. So our Universalist and Unitarian roots are Christian. Nobody else's roots have to be anything in particular. In fact, we bend over backwards for us to be eclectic. Every service has a variety. There's feminist voices, there's Buddhist voices a lot. There's usually some kind of Christian reference, poetry, science. We're all over the place, and everybody comes for 1,000 different reasons. Some people just come for the food. Some people just come because Severin's awesome. Who knows? Lots of reasons.
What is the difference between a UU church and a UU fellowship?
Generally, size is the biggest reason, and the other reason is how most fellowships don't have a minister, so that's often a distinction, but it's really just a word. A lot of UUs struggle with church as a word, and they struggle with it because they want to be in the fold of other religions. They don't want to be outside that, umbrella of the larger sort of churches in town, or because most of them are churches and synagogues, right? we're Christian enough in this country that that word has tended to dominate the frame in which we see this, even though it's not true. But it's mostly just size. There's no formal distinction. It's usually size and whether you have a called minister or not.
Do you have to believe in God to be spiritual?
No. I think the more important question would be, do you have to believe you have a soul to be spiritual? And I think the answer to both of those is no. But it depends on how you define spiritual, of course. I mean, I think that spiritual is the deepest. I would attach it to the feelings that we have more than anything else. Spirituality is about feelings that feel sourced in depth and shared and move your life, right? They're not feelings of like, oh, I'm hungry. They're feelings that you are part of something or excluded from something, or you are in the midst of something deep and real, right? And we all, with our big brains, have inevitably 1,000 questions about where we came from and what we're doing and what's our purpose and all of those things. And that's the intellectual side of spirituality. Spirituality is the felt side of that. And joy and, and everything. I mean, from, food to sex to song to worship to longing to all of it has a spiritual quality to it, right? And it's the act of seeing your life as meaningful, I suppose, in a way. I don't even know if I would stick with that, but that's something like that. So no, you don't need a God to be spiritual. We're spiritual without it. Whether there's a God or there's not a God, we're spiritual. So the answer to that is clearly a no. Anything else? Why don't we take one more?
Great. What is your favorite word and why?
What is my favorite word? I think Schadenfreude is my favorite word, and I'm not sure I'm even pronouncing that right, but that's a great word. It's a German word for like the pleasure you take at the misery of others, and I just think there's a beauty to that kind of black humor. So that's my favorite word. They're cringing out here that the minister just said that's his favorite word. I don't know. I like a few swear words too if I'm feeling cheeky. So it's now time for our offertory, and I usually tell kind of a silly offertory joke, and I will not change that tradition. And this is not a true story. So I went to a clergy group luncheon kind of thing, and we sort of were looking for a question. So, I had primed my answer, so just to be funny. So I asked this question. I said, how many members of your parish does it take to change a light bulb? Just to see what they would say. And the priest said, none. Usually the parishioners just light candles. Going around the room, there was an Episcopal minister, and she said, well, it generally takes 3. 1 to call the electrician, 1 to pour the tea, and 1 to initiate the discussion about how much we like the old light bulb better. And then there was an Amish person who stopped into the meeting, and we asked him how they changed the light bulb, and he said, light bulbs? Excuse me? And then they flipped the question back on me, because I had, of course, had a sheet of paper, and I said, well, we have developed a policy statement for this. We Unitarians and Universalists chose not to make a statement either in favor of or opposed to a new light bulb. We know that all of us are on our own journey, and we found light bulbs useful in our path. That's fine, but many of us have seen different sources of light. We're open to the value of candles, incandescent, fluorescent, and especially LEDs. We honor bulbs of all different tints and shades. And then we usually either call Bruce or Noel or Mike or Jose, and then we are grateful that they changed the light bulb. All right. Give generously for the life and work of this church. Next week we're going to do a split plate with maybe 1 or 2 COVID-related first responder types. So we're heading towards finding a way to be generous with this new outreach method. And take it away, boys.
This is the moment when we hold hands, and if we take a moment, maybe we can feel each other's hands holding each other's hands. This church is dedicated to the proposition that behind all of our differences, beneath all our diversity, there is a unity that makes us one and binds us forever together, in spite of time and death and the space between the stars. We pause in silent witness to that unity.
May the blessings of love be upon you. May love's peace abide with you. May love's presence illuminate your hearts now and forevermore. So be it. Amen. Shalom. Salam. Namaste. And blessed be. And as we say, now, at best, our service truly begins. Go in peace.
This is Michael Sochet.
How amazing is that? As I tell our musicians in a slight very frequently, don't give up. You almost got it. You just don't keep it faith. One of our members asked that I close sermons with readings, and I rarely ever do that, so I thought I would do that today. This is a great little piece from David Eaton called A Common Destiny. All living substance, all substance of energy, being, and purpose are united and share the same destiny. All people, those that we love and those we know not of, are united and share the same destiny. Birth to death, we share that unity with the sun and the earth. Our brothers, sisters, and strangers, flowers of the field, snowflakes, volcanoes, and moonbeams, birth, life, death, unknown, known, and unknown again. Our destiny from unknown to unknown. May we have faith to accept this mystery and to build upon its everlasting truth. Go in peace. Have a great week. 6 feet. Wash your hands.